So you're thinking of buying or selling a home in this post-NAR lawsuit real estate climate? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about what the NAR lawsuit is and how it affects you as a buyer or seller in this market now. So stick around until the end because I'm going to give you some good tips on how to approach buying a property in Colorado and specifically the Salida, Colorado area. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications so you're the first to know when new informative videos come available. My name is Monica McCarthy, a realtor that specializes in Salida and surrounding areas. And I get calls all the time from people just like you looking to live in this area. So whether you're thinking of moving here in a few weeks or a few months, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to set up a time to chat and help you make a smooth transition to the Salida, Colorado area. But first, let's take a big step back and talk about what am I talking about? The NAR lawsuit. Okay, so this is a very recent development in the real estate industry. There was a lawsuit that went on for several years between NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, and several plaintiffs. And that settlement occurred a few months ago, and the changes to the real estate industry that were an outcome of that settlement recently came about just this past August 2024. So if you're looking to buy or sell a property right now, this video is coming out just a short time after that. These changes are now implemented in the real estate market, not just in Salida, Colorado, not just in Colorado, but all over the nation. So I'm going to be covering this. It's a broad issue, but I'm going to be talking about specifically for Colorado here. Okay, so that NAR lawsuit was a recent settlement between the National Association of Realtors and several plaintiffs that alleged that there were anti-competitive behaviors going on in the real estate industry. The settlement addressed several concerns raised in the lawsuit related to transparency, compensation structure, and also competition in the real estate industry. It was argued that consumers had limited choice and transparency in real estate transactions because there was a perceived discouragement for consumers to negotiate compensation with realtors. So the outcome of that lawsuit, that more disclosure is required about the rate of compensation the real estate agent will receive and how that compensation is determined, and clarity that broker fees are fully negotiable and not at all set by law, and that there are set compensation fees like a flat fee or a commission and not a broad commission structure. And also that there's a term that prohibits the agent from receiving compensation greater than the amount agreed upon by the buyer, which we'll get into. And no compensation is allowed to be listed in the multiple listing service. So the majority of properties are on the MLS or the multiple listing service in every market. And for decades in the real estate industry, the compensation has been listed on there. That is no longer allowed. And another outcome of the lawsuit is that buyers have to have a signed buyer agreement with any agent before they can even see a property. And so I'm going to get into a lot more details on all of that. So what this means for buyers in today's market. So if you're looking to buy a house right now, you might have started by looking online. That's where a lot of buyers start. And so maybe you're watching a market, you probably haven't even talked to a realtor yet that's in that market. And maybe you see the perfect house come up. So you're used to having to just call somebody, doesn't matter who, to just show you the house. You just care about the house. You don't care who shows it to you. Well, now we need to take a step back, and the realtor who is showing you that property, you have to have an agreement with them. And if that property is listed on the multiple listing service, it is now required that you have a written agreement with that realtor before they show you the property. It's a good thing you're watching this video and reading up on all of this. You as the buyer want to be educated on the terms of that agreement and what that means for you, so you know what you're getting into and that you aren't in a position where you're unhappy. So what this agreement does, it's a buyer agreement, and the terms are negotiable. I do want to stress that. And what it does a few things. It outlines the working relationship between you and that real estate agent that's showing you that property. And So they have a role to play in representing you. And the reason why they want this in place is so you as the consumer understands who that person is. They're not just a warm body opening the door. They have a role, whether with you or the seller, or it could be more of a neutral position. So in Colorado, we've always had these buyer agency agreements. And if you've ever bought a property in Colorado, you've signed one, because before you can have somebody write an offer on your behalf, this buyer agency agreement has always been in place. The difference now is it has to be in place before you even walk in the door to see that first property. So just the agreement is happening earlier in the process than perhaps you are used to. And so it's clarifying that realtor, that buyer's agent's role with you, and saying how they represent you as the consumer. So if that agreement is exclusive between you and them, they are not representing the seller. They're exclusively representing you. They are your advocate. And this is the scenario that I highly recommend you do when you're buying a property, because the difference is advocacy. You are being represented fully. They can give you advice on pricing and just really give you insight, their real estate knowledge. Versus if they're representing the seller, so a lot of times buyers want to just call whoever has the property listed. Well, that person's representing the seller. And so they're either showing you the property as a customer, which means they're fully representing the seller, you are on your own, and they're just kind of going to help facilitate things. Or they can represent you as a transaction broker, which means they become no longer just an advocate of the seller, but more of a neutral party facilitating the transaction. The way I've always heard this described is that you go from being a coach to being a referee. And so that's a decent scenario, just to have that neutral party, but you don't have the buyer's agent in your corner giving you advice, particularly on negotiations, price, and any other terms in the contract that come up. So keep that in mind. So the buyer agency agreement is outlining the relationship between you and that realtor. It's also going to outline how that realtor is getting paid. A big, huge part of this settlement was we're talking about compensation just a lot more. It's very transparent now for all parties on how realtors are being paid. So the compensation for the buyer's agent, you as the buyer might have to pay. And so that's going to be disclosed in this agreement as well. So that buyer's agent, most agents don't work for free, as anybody in any industry should not. They want to be compensated when the house sells. So it's clarifying from the very, very beginning how they get compensated. And so there'll be a section in there clarifying what that amount is and what the terms of that are. So each realtor they're an independent person that can express how they want to be paid, and that agreement is between you and them. And again, that is negotiable. So that's a piece of that agreement that you want to understand as well. So be sure and ask lots of questions, understand how it works, and the value they're providing for you by that compensation that you might, and asterisk here because we're going to talk about this more, you might have to pay. Okay? So we'll talk a little bit more about ways you don't have to pay as a buyer. And then another piece of that agreement is also the length of the agreement. And so to understand the time in which you are agreeing to work with them in the capacity you've agreed upon. So the relationship I just spoke about. So that there's a term length attached to that. So whether you're talking about many months or fewer than that, that's between you and them, and that's a term that's negotiable. So ask lots of questions when you are signing this agreement. Another piece of advice I want to give about that is be sure you feel comfortable with that person. It's not just somebody who's opening a door for you. It's somebody, if you want to buy that house, it's the person that's going to help you buy that house, that you're agreeing to that in that agreement there. So I think it's better from a buyer's perspective to take a giant step back. And instead of just looking at houses in an area and then when the perfect house pops up, you just scramble and find somebody to open the door, also research realtors. When you're looking in a new area, do your due diligence and find somebody that you're comfortable with. So when the good house does come up, you already have somebody that can show it to you, that you have a relationship with, that knows your information and can represent you and also show you that house. So research houses and realtors at the same time, and perhaps realtors first, and make sure you have somebody that you're comfortable with so you're not in a position where you're scrambling because you just want to see a house and you're agreeing form a relationship with somebody that you're not comfortable with just so you can see that house. So make sure that you work with somebody that you're comfortable with and that you like. So that's my biggest piece of advice here in this entire video as a buyer. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the compensation piece. So when I say you might have to pay, you as the buyer, your buyer's agent's compensation. Now, remember how I said the cooperative broker, which is the person who's representing the buyer, their compensation is no longer listed in the multiple listing service. So when a buyer's agent is going out and showing property that's listed in the multiple listing service, it's a little bit of an unknown on what the compensation is. So it's up to them, and this is something that we do now in real estate, to find out if and how much the seller is offering in compensation. I'm going to talk a little bit about this from the viewpoint of the seller as well. But from the buyer's perspective, your real estate agent, so say you've hired somebody, you're comfortable with them, you're moving forward, you're going to see some properties. Now, every time you look at a house, you want to understand what amount, if any, the seller is offering for your buyer's agent's cooperative compensation. And so that amount is what they will be offered. If that amount that the seller is offering for the cooperative broker's compensation is none, for example, then you'd be in a position to need to pay for your cooperative broker's compensation, or is significantly less than the amount that you've agreed to pay them. So I'm not going to give any numbers here, but just know that the amount that you're agreeing to pay them is the amount that they are going to get, and they are not going to get more than that. So that's a big part of this settlement, is disclosing how much the compensation that they're going to earn in the after the deal closes, that they're going to earn. So from a buyer's perspective, you want to make sure you have a realtor that you're working with that does their due diligence before you see a house, so you understand before you see the house what you are essentially on the hook for. There are going to be many homes that it doesn't apply. And I'm seeing this a lot in our market now, where buyers, before we show a home, just find out how much the cooperative broker's compensation is, let my buyers know. Great, that's the amount we agreed on, gonna see the house. If the amount is zero, then you as the buyer have a choice of whether or not you want to see that house. And a big piece here is we can also negotiate the compensation in our offer. So Colorado's contracts recently changed to add a section where the compensation can be negotiated. So all or part can be part of the offer as a whole, just like you'd have other parts of, buying a house. There are terms more than just the sales price of the house. You talk about seller pay concessions. You talk about whether or not you want the fridge included, all of the things associated with the offer. That is now a piece of the offer. So if you're looking at a house that the seller is not offering compensation and you don't want to have to pay your buyer's agent's compensation, they can make all efforts to negotiate that compensation as part of your offer. And if it doesn't end up working out, then you can decide if you're moving forward that offer or still paying your cooperative broker's compensation. So the point for you as a buyer is to understand you could potentially have to pay that compensation. It's the amount agreed upon in that agreement that you sign before you see the house. So understand that agreement, ask lots of questions, make sure you're agreeing to an amount that you're comfortable with, that you're able to do, and that your agent is also being fairly compensated for. So because you want them to be able to work for you. And make sure that that agent understands that they can negotiate on your behalf within the offer. So I actually have, and my brokerage has, in our buyer agency agreements, an additional provision in there stating that I'm going to do my very best to get that compensation covered from the other side before I get it from you. So when you're looking to find somebody working for you, make sure that you have that as an option as well. And so you just feel more comfortable. There are buyers out there that might not be able to afford that, or you can also roll it into the offer and negotiate it as part of the offer as well. So that's really big for buyers. Now, let's talk about sellers. You as the seller, compensation is negotiable. It's always been negotiable, and it has become increasingly more apparent that it is negotiable on the amount that you're paying for both the person who's listing your property and the cooperative broker. It is still highly recommended that you offer a cooperative broker compensation. So remember what I was just talking about and talking to the buyers? You want to make sure that you're not losing out on buyers because you're not offering that cooperative broker's compensation. The buyers are going to know that from the very beginning before they see your house, and will decide whether or not they still want to see it. So if you're not offering that cooperative broker's compensation, you're limiting your buyer pool. And it's been estimated that there are over 80% of buyers use realtors. So do you want to have risk losing 80% of the buyer pool because you're not offering a cooperative broker's compensation? It makes sense that buyers want to use somebody because it's, for many people, the largest purchase of their entire lives. So to do that by themselves is not wise in many cases. So as a seller, don't limit your buyer pool, offer that cooperative broker's compensation. But just so you understand, everything is negotiable, and speak to a realtor who understands that and can guide you through it and is going to be communicative with the other side. So us as realtors, we have more communication needed regarding compensation, kind of behind the scenes, and also more paperwork between us. That's okay. That's part of this industry. And many are happy to adjust. We are an adaptable industry, and there's a lot of educated realtors in this industry who are educating themselves on these changes and are able to implement them well. So I see this as something, it shook up the industry for a few months. We are adapting now, and it's becoming commonplace. So just make sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're talking about, who can guide you accordingly, who can make you feel comfortable and look out for your needs, and also who is just really your advocate in whether it's to buy a home or sell a home, to guide you through these changes, and you are going to be in a good position in real estate. Now, if you're looking to buy or sell a property in Salida, Colorado area, please reach out to me. I'm Monica McCarthy, a realtor that specializes in Salida and surrounding areas, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have and talk to you directly about how this will affect you in your specific circumstances. Thanks so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.